Goran, thanks so much for taking the time to chat about Oven Age. Had the opportunity to see it last week and left a little teary-eyed and have been thinking about it ever since. When I left, I said to my friend, I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this for a few days. And we're a good like 4 or 5 days after, and I can't stop pondering sort of where these characters are now and everything that you presented there. But wanted to start off with, You Won't Be Alone was such a big hit last year for me. One of my favorites of the year. It was your first feature, a poetic exploration of humanity, and it had that supernatural lens. And then here with Of an Age, you take a different approach. It's a different type of film. It explores unexpected romance, sexuality, coming of age. Why was Of an Age the follow-up? Why was this a film that you wanted to make?
There was really honestly no strategy in a conscious way. I'm always stunned whenever anyone wants to, give me money to make the film I want to make, whichever one it happens to be. I say that, but like I wrote Of an Age. So in about March 2020, I went to Eastern Europe to shoot You Won't Be Alone, and then 2 days later flew home because pandemic. And then 5 months later, I went back, and this time we did manage to shoot the movie, which thank God. But it was during that gap between those two experiences that I wrote Of an Age and came up with it. Like, it wasn't an idea I had at the back of my head.
Oh, wow.
The moment it hit me, I kind of sat down and I wrote it. And it was like, my producer, I remember calling me about going, so I think, Serbia is a go, so we'll be filming next month. I'm like, okay, great. I just wrote another script and we're doing this one next. She's like, okay, I just have two questions. What language? What country? I'm like, Australia, English. She's like, oh, thank God, we can do that. Yeah. And that was it. That was yeah. I was just excited about it, because it was new. And then yeah, that was all it was, that was driving me. I feel as people, keep asking me if this film is autobiographical, and literally it isn't. Emotionally, it very much is. But I also said, You Won't Be Alone is my life and soul just split between two different women. It just happens to be witches in the 19th century. I feel like that in itself is an emotional autobiography in just a very different way. And I've just shot a third film, which I just finished editing, which again was a very intense emotional experience. And I'm realizing like it's so hard to not just get a film off the ground, but when you're shooting it and sort of like sometimes literally risking your life and definitely your sanity to put all these things together, like it needs to always feel worth it, and very few things do. So I just chased that feeling of knowing it'll definitely be worth it. There wasn't ever a moment where I felt on Of an Age of like, why am I doing this?
Sure.
It was always that sense of, I don't know if it's going to be any good if anyone watches it, or like, the final goal of that feeling that, ideally it leaves you with for ideally, days and days.
Sure.
That's worth it. That's what I'm chasing. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Goran, you just mentioned the emotional weight of the movies that you make. And I remember back last year, I think I was participating in one of the junkets for You Won't Be Alone. And I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone mentioning that behind the camera, you're so invested in the emotions that your actors are portraying on the screen. And I remember that being such a really phenomenal thing to hear, that, you're along for the ride with them. What is it about these emotionally heavy movies? And you just said you finished a third one that's also emotionally heavy. What is it about the emotional heavy films that really drive you?
I think again, it's that for something to be worth it, it needs to, you need to feel it in your whole body at all times. It can't just be a cerebral or strategic decision, because I don't feel like that works. And also the feelings build. As much as something can be moving while you're writing it, then it becomes more and more real. And not just my own feelings, but like I feel like it happened on all my films, but especially on Of an Age, the characters evolved based on who was cast. When I cast Elias to play the lead, initially when his audition tape came through, and he came quite late because he was the opposite to what was described on page, physically and in many other ways.
Oh, really?
Yeah, completely. And I mean, he looks a lot like me. So I think that's how he eventually got filtered through. And not a lot of boys look like me or him in the Australian arts circles, if you know what I mean. Anyway, like in many ways, it was very different to how the character was described, but like there was a rawness and a sense of a life lived in his eyes, and an emotional way to even just the simplest things he was saying. That I was like, my first instinct was like, well, he's obviously all wrong for the lead, but like he has to be in the movie somehow, and like let's find a role, and nothing was quite working. And then there was a sense of like, imagine this story and these feelings, but as in the shape of him rather than the abstract boy you initially imagined. And I was much more interested in that movie than I was in the one I came up with. Like,
Wow.
it wasn't suddenly like, and then especially after meeting him, I was like, I want his soul documented as much as I want my own or other people I love in my life. Or same with Hattie, who plays Ebony. There's this, people don't understand how much she improvised dialogue along the way.
Oh, wow.
This girl who's it's her first movie. And a lot of the improv would come out of conversations we've had, but also there's something of her that comes through in that. And like it becomes the more the character becomes real, then every feeling has a greater weight.
Yeah.
And that was it with all of them. Tom, who plays Adam, improvised quite a bit, and like you also become so connected to them, inevitably spending all this time together. And we're shooting it during a wave of COVID, so we had to be quite isolated, so we weren't even exposed to many other people at all. Okay. So there's a connection that builds, and they're about to land here. I'm in San Francisco at the moment in like an hour, and just keep checking my phone to make sure I've become like a little bit their dad. Actually, I think I'm the mom. My producer Christina is the dad. We refer to daddy boss. I'm definitely mom on set with the cast, dad with the crew. So all of those things build up essentially. And I think I never am that confident or aware of whether it's going to come across to a viewer. And I'm, ultimately I think a film is what comes across to the viewer, not what happens on set. But with You Won't Be Alone, a lot of the feelings we had, I could notice in the way people would write about the film, that things came through. And I think so far it seems with this one as well, it's the same thing. And, that's the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an authenticity that was there with You Won't Be Alone, and is certainly there with Of an Age. It's something that, I can't pinpoint in either film where it ensnares you, but at some point you realize that you're incredibly invested in the characters that are put forth. And especially with Of an Age, I mean, right until that final scene and the way it ends, without getting into that, I've been thinking about the characters a lot, and I think it comes down to the performances as well. Tom and Elias were incredible in those roles. You mentioned how Elias's role, or the character itself, evolved a lot. How about Adam with that role? Was that always sort of how you envisioned that being portrayed?
I mean, essentially, that was the creepiest thing, really, because with everything, like to me, I'm never. I go in with a vision for sure. Of course, we all do, but I'm never like tied to the way I picture the film in advance. I usually try to see what's in front of me, and I'm used to. My background was in like DIY short films. Like if you go in trying to control shit, you're never going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anything finished. So it's this thing of like I'm very used to turning up on set and going, what's in front of me? It matches nothing of what I wrote, but how do we shape this into something that gives you either a similar feeling or something that is as worthwhile, essentially. So I'm not used to ending up with a character performance on screen that really closely matches what I envisioned. And yeah, it's freakish with Mr. Tom Green. Like even from his first read through, and it was such a coincidence as well because like apart from the main casting process that was happening, I was running other things in the background in consultation with my casting agent. But I went through like every indie Australian film made in 10 years and like every graduation tape made by all of the drama schools for 10, 15 years. And when I came across Tom, it was just clips from a film he had made called Downriver. which is also very much worth checking out. And they weren't even showy acting, like it wasn't a crying scene or whatever, it was just genuinely him like wandering around and walking into a cafe, and just the way he walked and interacted, it just felt like you're watching a human being, not someone acting, it felt very lived in somehow. And I was like, I emailed my casting agent like that hour ago, who is this guy, can we like send him, approach him? And she's like, oh, that's so random, his audition tape just came through like an hour ago. And I watched it, and like it was the first one I watched, actually. And what was happening in his eyes, and it wasn't even like, because I didn't have a concrete vision of what Adam looks like, but I think the eyes and what was going on with the eyes is what it's kind of like, it's hard to kind of, it's more like a vibe with eyes that I'm picturing when I'm writing, essentially. And what was happening with his, it was just so close. Like that first delivery was already like, this doesn't even barely needs direction or development, frankly. And we met via Zoom. He lived in Sydney at the time, and like, we just had a random conversation. Like we got along very well. He brought up his pubic hair immediately for no reason. Definitely wasn't asking for it. So that was the friendship we had straight away.
It's an interesting casting process you're running there.
And he's like the exact opposite personality to what's on screen. That's the other thing. Everyone kind of like falls in love with him and just tries to meet him, and they're like, he's not that guy at all, But but also what was happening on set, that I was only half consciously appreciating at the time. While I'm on set, I'm only thinking, what's the problem I have to fix? There isn't a problem. I'm not going to think about this right now. So what was happening is, he was very, Adam is a little bit of a nurturer as a character, and what Tom I never would describe like that if on the surface, but like he was very much a nurturer with the younger actors on set. He was a rock for them as much as I ever could be. He was my co-parent. And yeah, so I think and with him the conversation was about building in, like answering every question and just building in the backstory and the story world of these characters. But yeah, it was a very like, I'm still stunned even just watching it on set on the monitor, and just like this character coming to life so easily. There wasn't a bad take.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the eyes, because there are a number of shots in here where you really do focus in on the face, so either one of the characters. And it's, again, I think that just humanizes them. And you see, in the teary scenes, you see Tom as Adam tearing up slowly, and it kind of catches you off guard, and Elias is doing the same thing. It's, again, I think that authenticity that really just drives the movie forward.
It also doesn't feel like, especially if you know them, it doesn't feel like they're acting in that moment. Like you realize they're genuinely feeling these feelings. So, it's impossible to kind of not, for me anyway, it's impossible to not respond to it, because it's not someone trying to, do an Oscar clip like or to show off. There's no awareness of that. Like we're all so in the moment. And even with the way we shoot, like, action just means the crew is ready and everything's filming, but it doesn't mean you start straight away. Like sometimes it was like 3 minutes, like, Elias would literally be lying in bed trying to actively fall asleep, so it looks like he's waking up, for real. But the actors kind of, they had time, and they worked in their own time. So feelings, don't always come on schedule, and if they do, they're fake. So with them, like, it wasn't an instruction, but it's an instinct. It's only when the feeling hits that you kind of go to that part of what the scene is written, or build on it. Sometimes you do something that wasn't written, but the feeling is driving you. So it needs to come from a place that is physical, more than cerebral.
Sure. That's excellent. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, and I have two more questions. Do you have a favorite scene from the film that stands out to you, or one that maybe has a funny story behind it?
Oh, I like the one that I always, it's so random. When it's in the early section, the moment he hangs up and runs past those power lines to get to his friend's house to get the dress. Like those are like, that's where I live. Those are literally the power lines. I wasn't running to pick up a dress. I was running to catch Isabelle Huppert in the only showing, piano teacher had in Melbourne for or whatever. So I was even gayer than he was. But
So that
yeah,
wasn't like an
that
outfit
happens.
from your personal collection that he was using in
Sorry,
the film?
sorry.
That wasn't an outfit from like your personal
No,
collection?
I was very, you know, my mission was always to not stand out in my clothes, so that's very different from
I
me as well.
understand
But
that.
also, it was the thing, like just that song, and you know, I've played it to a couple of people from the Balkans because we all grew up with it, and it's just it hits you in a special way if you know the context, and also none of us are used to that kind of needle drop, and you know, a song comes on and it's something that you grew up with. We're used to like absorbing Western pop culture, and that's how you engage. Whereas that song, which is called Tissimi Kirby, I will spell it for you. You know, it's not something you ever heard in a movie, much less in this kind of context. So like, and it's not even anyway. It's just I cannot describe to you the feeling of like, wow, this could not be more me. So it's not technically autobiographical, but I swear, like,
It's incredible.
this is insane when I see that sequence.
You made a film that you're even finding ways to identify with unintentionally.
Absolutely, I'm shocked by it.
Goran, what do you hope that people take from the film at the end of the day?
Oh, I think again, it's not a feeling I want to define. If it's, I think if you can verbalize a feeling, you should write the book on it. I think the movie needs to be something you can't quite put into words. And you know, there's the sense of like I don't want to describe it a weight in my chest, but like a pressure in my chest that it gives me, you know, and it stays with me for days.
Yeah.
So when you describe something that stays with you for days, or like when people come up to me at the end of a movie and they say, "You've just told my story," and some of them are gay men, a lot of them are straight women, you know, like that is really what makes me feel like everything is worth it, you know, because it's hard to make films a lot of the time, and then experiencing that feeling, you know, in various cities around the world, from mining towns to like, you know, San Francisco. Yeah, that's what I dream of and hope for, I guess.
I think as a gay man and myself, I really appreciate the LGBTQIA storytelling, and I wonder, is that something that you're hoping to continue to do, to tell more stories in that
Oh, I
space?
mean, I've just finished editing my third film, which is plenty gay. Let me show you. Yeah, I think that one has more sex scenes. It's lesbians, it's gay men, it's all sorts of things. So let me assure you, the gayness is not about to like decline in my work. Um,
Excellent.
and then movies going forward. I mean, yeah, a lot of them are queer stories. Not always love stories, but inevitably, queer love plays a massive role in a queer person's life. So yeah, that, you know, again, for me to make a film, it needs to be, I need to feel it very intensely and feel very intensely connected to it, and inevitably a queer story, not always a male one, admittedly, but is something that I you know, glam onto very quickly.
Sure.
So yeah.
Well, Goran, I said it earlier that both of these films I just was absolutely enthralled with. There's so much heart in them, and it's obvious that there's so much care, not only with the actors that are on screen, but the filmmaking in general. So I just appreciate both films. They're so great. They're so impactful and different in different ways. So I just thank you for that. Wish you all the best in the future, and thank you for taking the time with me today to talk about Of an Age.
Oh, thanks, Jared. No, it's really moving to hear all of this, especially anyone who's seen both my films. I'm already stunned. But, no, it's really moving to hear it. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.